Hey everybody, welcome to Social Selling for Newbies. We are running a little bit late. Nothing like wonderful technology challenges to kick you off, but hey, we're so excited to have everybody here and just going through kind of the housekeeping stuff again. Don't forget about Social Selling HQ, free membership. It's a great community. Find other people that are asking the same questions that you are, find great answers. And then also, if you're watching this on our LinkedIn Live, awesome, love it, thank you. Throw your comments in there, and we'll use those as questions and interact with you. And if you're on the podcast, thanks for subscribing to the podcast. We Tom sent us the numbers, and we keep growing, which is kind of cool and fun. Not bad for a couple of dumb guys just trying to have conversations, right?
Very true.
Yeah. So anyway, everybody that's listening, I'm Brandon Lee and one of the co-hosts, and I have Carson Hedden, the other co-host today, and Tom Burton is on an airplane somewhere. So I'm sure he'll listen to it and critique us and give us feedback on everything as he can. So let's kick off today because I'm really excited to have this conversation. And Carson, we especially wanted to make sure that you were on for this conversation because the topic around out-of-the-box KPIs that actually move the needle, our topic for the day, was really inspired by a comment that you made in one of our shows when you were sharing about one of the conversation topics that you share with your team or your team shares with each other at Microsoft. And that was, how many new conversations did you have this week? And I thought that was such a great KPI. So today's topic is going to be around out-of-the-box KPIs that actually move the needle. So let's get started, Carson. I'm going to welcome Rob. He's in here. Rob, thanks for joining us on the comments. And anybody else, I'd love to hear, where you are, any questions you have, or here's our question. What are some of the KPIs that are not traditional KPIs that you believe help you move the needle in building relationships or even building relationships that lead to a sales opportunity and close deals? So there we go. Now I'm just going to shut up the rest of the time and hand it off to Carson, and he's going to bring it home with all of his wisdom.
Hardly. No, I promise to still bug you, Brandon. And Happy New Year to everyone.
That's right.
2023 with a lot of folks come in with a new refreshed mindset and eager to get off to the races for prospecting. Whether you've got a new book of business or in some cases maybe your fiscal year runs to June. There's never a bad time for prospecting and for a lot of the things that we're going to talk about from a social selling perspective. So I definitely would be interested to get some feedback in the chat as far as KPIs that move the needle for you around social selling. And I'll also say that, I think, and I don't want to foreshadow too much because I know next week we're going to talk about, really building a social selling team as a leader. But these are some of the things that we think about. They change. Right. Some of the priorities change. And, I was reading a funny post earlier today on LinkedIn where, one of the most common answers that sales leaders give to just about any equation is it depends. And so I would be remiss not to start off by saying it really depends on your circumstance and situation when it comes down to some of the most critical KPIs. But at the end of the day, and this is where I'm going to allude to the section for next week, is I've made the transition in my career of being a social selling seller into being a sales leader who has worked to cultivate a culture of social selling. And that's why I think that's so important, to really wrap your head around what you're trying to do. And so for me, it wasn't as much about, thinking about the quality touches and the, just raw horsepower of going out and prospecting. It was, how can we quantify this? Because the reality is you can't really gauge your success or where you need to tweak the process unless you have some things that you're tracking. Everything has to be trackable. So let's just start off and let's talk about some of the things that I think are most important. So, Brandon, one of the things I know you're super passionate about is, let's talk about how we go out and we perhaps we ring the bell on somebody's LinkedIn profile so that we can be notified every time that our target prospect posts. We're going in, we're liking, we are commenting, and we are sharing. Those are things that absolutely there are KPIs around that we can track. We can track the number of comments that we make in a given day. We can track the number of likes, shares, things of that nature. I've noticed on a lot of the social media platforms that they will embrace different types of media, from video to pictures, but also to good quality content, and really optimizing, like for instance on LinkedIn, the first 3 lines of text. And so, but making one post daily and being consistent in that. So that's also part of our Newbie Nation challenge currently that we're running, and I'm still active on that. So I think that was a few sessions ago that we started that. I've made a post every single day, and I'm tracking right now the amount of engagement that I'm getting. The impressions, the total number of likes, comments, and then just the level of engagement that I'm getting out of that. So that is one key suite, I would say, of KPIs. Some of the others, when I think about prospecting, and this is something that my team and I do on a regular basis, I think about the total number of potential targets. Now, in my world, we've got a whole suite of services that we go after. There's a lot of different lines of business that are ultimately the customers that we work to break ground with and forge relationships with. So I may have, if I run a search or a query on Sales Navigator, I may have a total of 200 people, like I did earlier this week, that have a specific title or something in their specific jurisdiction or work for a specific organization that I want to go after. So I can track, okay, this is how many connection requests I sent. Maybe you can send 100 connection requests on LinkedIn per week, as an example. You can send 400 messages per day, typically, before there's any type of flagging on your account from an activity perspective. And this gives you a lot of free reign to do what you need to do. I mean, there's not a lot of weeks where I need to send 100 connection requests or where I need to send 400 messages in a day. So there's a lot of capability to say, okay, if I know that I'm going to go out and let's say there's a specific title, CEO, CFO type relationship that I'm trying to go out and create. I've got, maybe I'm geo targeting, right? So I'm looking at certain size of small, mid-sized business, within a geography, and I'm, I know that I can make 100 outreaches in a week. Perhaps that gives me the capability to track that. And so being able to have a grid or a spreadsheet where I'm saying, all right, I'm reaching out to 100 people this week, and then I'm going to send 100 messages. Now let's dig in another layer. And so, Brandon, to your earlier point, talking about some of the, what quality relationships did we get as a byproduct of this outreach? What meetings did we set up? So this is where there's kind of a fork in the road from a KPI perspective, because, and I want to wrap up with one other one, and then I want to get your thoughts. But where I see this going is now we're down to the quality of touches, and we've talked a lot on this show and others about the things that we can control, the controllables, the inputs when it comes to social selling. So you can control the quality of your outreach. So having a very specific message that you're sending to these prospects. If I reach out to 100 people and I get 20 responses, but then I tweak my messaging and I get 40 responses, obviously that was a valuable tweak to make, and that's why we do so much to track these things. Now, the next step is controlling the quantity of outreach, but you want it to be quality outreach, right? So, typically I'll try to reach out to anytime that I run any type of sales play, I'll build a community around what we're doing. We may do newsletters to go out to thousands of customers. We may do webinars. And I think it's important to have a balance of very focused plays that you're doing, very niche, very targeted writing to a very specific targeted prospect for a very specific solution that you're trying to drive, all the way compare and contrast to reaching out to thousands of folks with a newsletter that is laced with some type of telemetry based output, so that I get a readout of who's reading it, what are they reading, how long are they sitting on this for. And I've seen these through tools like Seismic, tools like Smart Links, which is out of Sales Navigator. And that is a whole nother layer of KPIs, being able to really track the quality and quantity. The last one that I wanted to bring up, and I wanted to get your thoughts on and the audience's thoughts on, is the merit around the social selling index, because that is kind of a governing KPI, right? The ability to go into Sales Navigator and see the social selling index that you have that's really built around, hey, am I building the right relationships? Am I using these tools in order to go out and find a very targeted group of people based on geography, based on organization, based on industry, based on title, et cetera? And then how am I engaging with insights? Because the social selling index will really comb the entire LinkedIn suite of services to give you a score that shows how well you're leveraging those things collectively. I see some really good questions in the chat. I want to get to those, but first, Brandon, I'd love to get your thoughts on some of the things that I walked through, and then what I've missed, because I know that you and I have different styles, but also missions that we're going after in our respective endeavors.
Yeah. Am I causing feedback when I go off mute?
It's minimal.
Yeah, sorry, I'm on the road, everybody, and that happens. Yeah, I mean, hey, Carson, all great stuff, and we do have slightly different approaches, I think, or different goals, but they all kind of collectively lead towards the same thing. And I want to address what Rob said, because Rob said two different comments there. First, he said he was really concerned about the social selling metrics because they can be perceived as vanity metrics. And I agree 100% with that. I think, likes, especially views, it gives you a little bit of a gauge, but they're not gauges that I put a whole lot of merit into. Now, comments, on the other hand, depending on the type of comment, I think there's value because of this. And it goes to Rob's second comment that he said in here, which is quality relationships established and conversations booked is, in my opinion, the metric that really matters. And I agree wholeheartedly with that, Rob. I think, when social media kind of first came on the scene, we called it social networking, right? It was about networking. The social selling concept came about as, so-called gurus came on the scene and started saying, hey, we're going to use this to go sell. And I believe it is the complete opposite of the way that we should be using, not the complete opposite maybe, but it's very different than the way I think we should be using, and therefore the different types of KPIs that we can look at. I think that how many comments we make on posts that either our prospects, very targeted prospects, have published themselves, or, and I know people raise their hand, oh, my prospects don't publish. Got it. As long as they're active, if they are liking and commenting on other posts, the value proposition is there for you. You come along behind them, meaning you go to their post activity once a week, twice a week, whatever your cadence is, and you see what they're engaging with, and you comment on what they're engaging with. The value is that LinkedIn is going to notify them. They're going to send them an email. They're going to give them a notification that says, hey, Brandon Lee commented on a post that you liked. Now, that in and of itself, I think is a great tactic for starting to build awareness and moving yourself into a conversation. But then when you package that with what Carson was saying around the full package of sending strategic emails, creating strategic webinars, maybe whatever it may be around that specific company or that specific ICP, we're just layering on activities that are getting us known, liked, trusted, and we're building awareness about who we are, what we do, and the value proposition of the product. So I think that the KPI that I really like is how many comments did you make that strategically positioned you in front of your top 100 prospects, or however you want to quantify that, 100, 200, 500, whatever that number may be. That is one of my favorite non-traditional KPIs, because I think it gives the biggest bang for your buck. That goes all the way back to what Rob was saying. Using those comments in order to develop a commenting conversation that then can strategically be led to a digital conversation and direct messaging, something of, hey, thanks for that comment, really, love your insights on it. And all of a sudden you're starting to build that know, like, and trust, and build a little bit of awareness. But it also can very strategically be led to, hey, would you like to get on a Zoom or on a phone call and have a conversation about it? Not selling anything, just love to keep the chat, keep the conversation going. So those are my initial thoughts. Carson, where else do you want to take this conversation?
Yeah, no, and I think that's an important delineation, right? Because I'm a lot less concerned, like, on a post that I make, as far as, like, to Rob's point, some of the vanity metrics. It's really all about how can I go out and I can track how much time I'm spending proactively going out and logging and tagging and liking and commenting. And I think it's super important that we're investing in that. Really, honestly, the only metric that I typically care about, which is of my own my own statistics from LinkedIn, is views. How are we going out and creating that opportunity where, think of yourself like you're a billboard, and you're creating an opportunity whereby a potential customer can view your profile and show some type of interest. Because ultimately, a lot of times, these are the types of things that can result in conversations and in a genuine, healthy relationship, because that's really all we're after. That's the ultimate governing KPI, is quality conversations, quality relationships. And that's really what it's all about. And so I think about the places that I get a lot of these, and it's reacting and responding when, for instance, there is, from my very cultivated Sales Navigator feed, I see something actionable, like a new executive or an acquisition, or something that was shared in the news about that organization. And then I can go out, and to your point, and Brandon, you said this perfectly, when I'm able to go out and I'm able to see my target prospect making these posts on different things, you get an indicator, a clear indicator of what's at the pulse of your target audience, and what you need to be talking about, and what you need to be showing up with unique value about, and what you need to be solving for. So I think that's super important. Susan, you asked a great question in here too. Do we use the share lead list feature of Sales Navigator? And I would absolutely say yes. In fact, ironically, I was doing a Sales Navigator training earlier today. And some of the metrics don't necessarily like scream off the page when you're building a Sales Navigator strategy. But because when I go in and I follow, for instance, my team today, we cover 20 customers, right? 20 enterprise, large organizations. But there's a total of 61 in our Sales Navigator because of some of the different subsidiaries, business units, acquisitions that have been made. And so it's important to make sure that we understand that. That's the KPI that's important, right? There's 61 total LinkedIn accounts that sit in that jurisdiction, in that purview. And then I can go out and I can follow all of those. Then on the flip side of that, I can go in and I can save leads, right? But I can also, it's very important that I do saved searches. And I'll go in, I'll read our marketing reports that say, these are our solution plays. These are the key stakeholders that we need to have in every single one of these business units in order to effectively run this play. And then I can go out and form a very cultivated search within Sales Navigator. And then I share that with my entire team so that they can run the same thing. And of course, they can modify it as they see fit and run it for their subset of accounts. But that is super valuable. And when I go in there and I save leads and I go back to my lead lists, it's going to show me the exact number. So talking about KPIs, it will show me the exact number of people that I've saved at every one of these organizations as I go down the list. And so that's super important when I've made the transition into being a social sales leader as opposed to an individual contributing social seller, is thinking about outcomes, thinking about the actual outcomes that are being driven from social selling. I mean, that's one of the things that I've had to prove out over my time social selling over the last decade is where can I point to results here? What tangible outcomes can I point back to? And at the end of the day, like one of the biggest ones is revenue, right? So to be able to say that I've been able to, and my team and I combined have been able to, convert over $250 million from deals that never would have existed without starting a key executive relationships on LinkedIn. It's a pretty big KPI to be able to point out. But I think you want to be intentional as you think about the KPIs that are going to be extremely important. The last thing I want to say on this thread, and Susan, you said something that I think is really impactful here too around SSI. I see a lot of focus on SSI from different folks. And I think a lot of times too, there's a lot of focus on SSI for folks that are just getting started from a social selling perspective. So hence our audience, newbies. I think it is a great place to start and start thinking about some of the things that may matter. But I'll tell you, as I've spent a lot of time prospecting on LinkedIn over the last several years, my social selling index used to be in the 90s, and it's plummeted because I use it for very different reasons. So by no means do I use it as the barometer of my success today, but I do think it is very insightful. It's kind of like taking a social selling strategy. Your KPI strategy, I wouldn't necessarily discriminate against any of the different metrics, but I would certainly be mindful of what all of them are and think about what they might be telling you about how you could do your social selling strategy differently, and maybe what KPIs are going to be the most important. And then finally, what additional KPIs might I or should I want to unearth as I proceed in my process?
Yeah, and I think what you're saying there at the end too, Carson, makes a lot of sense. There's a lot of different KPIs that we could focus on, and I think it's that learning process. And part of this is we're all newbies, but try some things and find out what is moving the needle. Rob said, asked you, are you referring to views on your profile or views on a post?
On the profile. I think it's important to view those daily to see who's checking you out. And they might be checking you out as a result of your outreach. They might be checking you out as a result of you liking and commenting on their posts. But I think that's important because it's kind of like viewing your marketing readout and your marketing leads, because it's a higher propensity to get a meeting. If they're checking you out, which we all know our buyers are going to check us out before they do any business with us, I think it shows that, hey, there might be a higher propensity to get that meeting. So great question, Rob, but I was referring in that case to views to your individual profile.
And I agree with Carson as the views to the profile being important for that. Who's coming, who's going, what they're, where they're from, and you can get a little bit of a barometer of that. And I think, look, if somebody's come and viewed your profile and they're on your prospect list, maybe that's an opportunity to open up the door and maybe push it a little bit further. Reach out if they're not a connection, or if they are a connection, and share a piece of content or introduce yourself, or however that right next step is in your playbook. But I will say that views on a post, I think there's some importance there as well. And hear me out, and Carson, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. One of the things that I've noticed over the last couple of months, and this is kind of hard for me to even say because I was like, I don't like doing pictures of myself on social media. Like I feel like it's kind of vain. Like nobody should really care that much about me. Why would I put pictures of myself? But I was listening to someone else, and they were talking about, the data was when there's a picture of a person, the views go up dramatically. So I was like, okay, well, let me try it. I don't know if you remember this, Carson, but I don't know, month and a half ago, I took a picture in the airport, had the plane in the background. I was talking about the trip I was taking. My views skyrocketed. I was like, this is interesting. So then I tried it again, and then I tried it again. And what I've noticed is when I do, now, if I did it every day, I think people would go, get over yourself and move on. But periodically doing that, the views increase. And here's why I like views. Here's why I think they're important. Part of it is just your reputation precedes you. And if your buyers, your audience sees you as being, and I'm going to do in air quotes for on the podcast, popular, influential, a voice in the industry, all of those are stacking up the variables that increase your probability to closing a deal. To take one of Carson's favorite things to say about increasing your probability. So I think that those views are important. One is it kind of hacks the algorithm that if I post, one of the things I'm doing now is I'll post a post with a picture and say something kind of fun or more on the personal side, increases my engagement. The next day, my post is very focused on value proposition. Now, why do I do that? Well, because the day that I do the picture and my views go up, I'm influencing the algorithm. And now the next day, they're going to show that post to more people. Now, it will depends, if I don't get a whole lot of play, the views are going to go down. But initially, it helps me reach more people, which is just small little aware tweak to what I've done. And I wouldn't have known that if I wasn't looking at my data. What do you think about that, Carson? And
Yeah,
Rob?
I think it's important too. And Rob, you made that great point earlier about some of these stats around likes and comments and things of that stature. I think it's important to, continue to broaden the reach, right? I mean, that's why we try to learn what works and what doesn't with the algorithm. And I would agree, like one of my biggest hits this past year was making a post of my family. I was smart enough not to just post my mug, right? But people reacted and responded to the beautiful ladies in my life, my wife and daughters, and that post was quite well received. But in all seriousness, that's the key element, is really understanding those things and picking some of these different mediums that we're comfortable with. And you and I have talked about this before, where when you think about a social selling strategy, you almost map out what types of posts you're going to make, and you want to pick from a different kind of a potluck, right? Because some days I may be posting something very specific around leadership and culture and selling and whatever may have you, and another day I may post something very company specific, some business use case, some news, something along those lines. I may post something very personal on another day, because when you have a social selling brand, it's very important that you are showing your true and authentic self, because ultimately you're wanting to forge quality relationships. So that's where I think the views can definitely come in. You want to increase your reach so that you can create those quality conversations. And, I think that's where those views of profile will also be a great result. I did want to say hi to Mark as well, joining us from Ireland. So Mark, thanks for being on. And, one of the other...
He's on YouTube. He's on YouTube as well. He's on our YouTube channel. Yeah, very nice. Look at us getting more reach.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think for me to just keep emphasizing that people do business with people who they know, they like, and you can throw the trust. But the personal post, I think, have a lot of positives, and it's probably the one that's the hardest for a lot of people to do. It was really hard for me. And I did start, Carson, like you. I did pictures of my family, and I kind of took advantage of, we have 5 kids, and that's one way people will remember me, with having such a big family. And then I do the dad jokes, and they kind of remember me that way. And so I played into that. And what I've learned is those things have opened doors for me. I've had people send me messages that say, hey, I came across this, and, I come from a family of 5, or, just various things. But when we start to put ourselves out there, it's amazing how some people connect with us. And one of my best posts on LinkedIn over the last couple of years, probably ever, to be honest, and it was up over 80,000 views. And it was a picture of a 10-year-old boy on our doorstep on a little dirt bike and his helmet. And I told the story about how I heard this motorcycle coming up our driveway, and we kind of have a long driveway, so I knew it was coming up. I go walking out to go see who's coming up. And again, with 5 kids, I'm going through the Rolodex of oldest child, next child, like who do we know that's on a motorcycle? And of course, here's our 10-year-old neighbor, great kid, pulls up his little eye shield and goes, hi, Mr. Lee, can Zoe, who was 8 at the time, can Zoe come out and play? And it just struck me as really funny that somebody was on a motorcycle asking for my 8-year-old daughter, right? So I just told that as this little story, and it just took off. And I have people commenting on it that were my second or my third connections, and it resonated with a lot of parents. And it resonated with other people that said, oh my gosh, I remember when a guy I went on a date with showed up at my house on a motorcycle, and this is what my dad said. And like all these stories came about, and I created, I don't know, like 50, 60 new connections from it. but there were people that felt like they knew me or they resonated with me, like we had some sort of a connection. And I think going all the way back to what started this topic was, Carson, you and your team talking in your meetings about how many new relationships did you build this week, or how many new conversations did you have? And for me, it always comes back to when it changed my life dramatically. Unfortunately, I was older than I should have been when I learned it. Was it's who you know, not what you know. And obviously, we have to know things. We need to be smart and we need to be wise. But who we know is where doors get open. And social is the tool that I've seen to do that the best, the widest, outside of paying a lot of money to have someone write a book, or to pay a lot of money to be on stage somewhere, or some of the other ways that we can pay to play. I think for the average salesperson, this tool, when tweaked, is such an efficient tool to meet your prospects and others and create those conversations.
Super powerful. And it's like we talk about all the time, your approach is going to be personal to you. And that's why I think at the end of this, if you're sitting down today and you're thinking about what KPIs should I be thinking about or socializing or working with my team, think about what activities and what mediums lead to quality conversations, because quality conversations will beget relationships will beget pipeline will beget deals. And at the same time, being versatile and flexible so that you can adapt and pivot as you kind of learn from what's working and what's not. I mean, I look back at a decade of social selling. I've changed my outreach verbiage dozens of times, but every time I change it, my probability of getting the meeting goes up and up, because it's tailored toward what objections am I getting, and now I can be counterintuitive in my approach. Same thing with thinking about all the different ways that you can engage your audience. Where are they? I can do KPIs for every platform I'm on: LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, whatever it is. I can talk about what posts I made. Susan made a great comment in the chat. Using a social calendar is really great for doing advanced planning to track your posts and content. Like, I'm already writing my post for tomorrow because I know I'm going to have minimal time to be on social. So I'm already writing kind of when I have spare time, what I want to be engaging with tomorrow. So I think that's super smart. And then lastly, I would say, like, for all these things that I've started to do over the years, whether it's, doing a webinar or doing a newsletter or doing posts to these different profiles, or investing time in going out and sending connection requests, or following people on Twitter or Instagram or whatever that that are basically people that I want to create a dialogue with. All of these things are things that you can track. And so I would challenge you to just think about, what could I track today that could help me understand better what mediums and methods are going to lead me to quality conversations, and then just be willing to adapt and pivot and see what's working and what's not.
And Carson, what I really liked about the way you said that too is, what are those for you in your business that you can track and do? We're not saying go look at likes, go look at comments, go look at views, not the vanity metrics. What are the ones that will really move your needle? And this is where we talk a lot about mindset, the mindset around social. And I think this is important. This is a drum that I plan on beating throughout 2023, is that this isn't easy, but it's okay, because nothing in sales is easy. For some reason, there's been this belief that social selling is supposed to be some sort of a magic bullet, and all of a sudden it's just going to work. And so therefore people tend to go with either, oh, social selling is supposed to be easy, and then they go swing all the way over and go, social selling sucks, it doesn't work. Look, this is a tool, and when used well, it's going to deliver. But you have to start using the tool in order to get better with the tool. It's like the first time you went to a networking event, you probably didn't crush the room and walk away going, oh my gosh, that was awesome, I'm coming back tomorrow. No, we go there and we're like, oh shit, like this is scary, and I don't know how to shake, what do I say, and how do I start a conversation? And you try different topics of starting conversations until you start to get a feel for, hey, this is my style, this is the way it works. And I equate that to the types of posts we post, the way that we comment, the way that we reach out to other people and introduce ourselves, you got to try it to start learning what works for you.
You nailed it. And Butch, you're spot on. Who knows you is important, as important as who you know. So how can we leverage these things to create relationships? And ultimately, all of your KPIs should be focused on creating dialogue and making sure that you're doing it in an optimal way.
Absolutely. Well, Carson, as usual, full of wisdom. Thank you so much for sharing all that you do and everything you bring to the social selling for newbies. And for everybody listening, hey, Tom and I are going to have a really, really special and awesome guest next week. Our guest is actually going to be Carson. So we decided next week we're going to put him a little bit more on the hot seat, and we're going to treat him like a guest, and we're going to ask him some questions about being a social selling leader and how he manages that, how he leads, what his expectations are, what's important to him. So for any of you out there, if you're a sales leader and you're either not sure about incorporating social, and I do say that intentionally, incorporating social, not putting everybody on LinkedIn only and forget everything else. If you're looking at incorporating social, our next episode will be really important for you, as Carson's gone from an individual producer to an individual producer that really got into social selling to now leading a team around social selling. And, he works for that small startup company called Microsoft. So, he's got a big team, and they're doing some really great outreach and sales activities leading to, and I heard the number you said earlier, I think you said $250 million you can attribute to your social outreach activities.
That's right. Yeah. And it is a mindset shift. It's really thinking about, how can we get a team to understand the value and adopt? It's kind of the flip side of a prior episode that we did, where it's really understanding the data behind it and selling your manager on it. How do you develop a culture of social selling?
All right. Well, everybody, thank you so much. Those that are on the LinkedIn Live, Susan and Rob and David and Nikki and Rob, I don't know who else I forgot. We had Mark, our first comment through our YouTube channel, which is really awesome. Thank you so much for coming. Everybody on the podcast, we appreciate you just as much. And be sure, if you're finding value in this, to share it with your friends. And excuse me, my allergies are killing me today. But also remember the free community at Social Selling HQ. We got new features in there, and we're really planning to do a lot more activity in there, kicking off here in January. So be sure to come and join that community and tell us what you know and ask the questions you need answered. And somebody in there is bound to be able to help you out. So, all right, everybody. Thanks so much. And Carson, you want to close us out?
We'll see everyone next time. Thanks for being with us. And until then, happy social selling.
That's my favorite part of the show, Carson.
Mine too.